All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are so excited to celebrate Pride Month with an amazing panel. My name is Mark Jameson. I'm the Chief Development and Support Officer for Propelled Brands, which is the franchisor for Fast Signs and Nerds to Go. I am also the co-founder of the Pride Council with my dear friend Paul Pickett. And we are so excited to be seeing things kind of come back to normal and really be able to talk about Pride and share some great stories. And I am just so excited about the Wendy's crew that you're going to meet in a few minutes and all the great stories and the great things they've done for diversity and inclusion and being prideful. So we started the council in November of 18, I guess it was, and with an amazing turnout. And we had some congressional people there. We've done some great follow-up. And then we kind of all took a break during COVID. And now we're starting to ramp back up again. And so I hope that you listening today and participating, that you'll want to help us continue to make the Pride Council something that anybody in franchising can recognize, that franchising is a great place to be prideful and to celebrate and to support everybody that's a member of the LGBTQ community. So I did not do this alone. I did it with my dear, dear friend and co-chair of the Pride Council, Mr. Paul Pickett. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul for a few minutes. Paul.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to everybody. Thanks to our panelists for being here, and thanks for all of you out there listening. We've got a nice full house, and we're very excited. My name is Paul Pickett. I am the Chief Development Officer for Wild Birds Unlimited. I've been here for a long time, 32 years. Wild Birds Unlimited is the largest franchise system of backyard bird feeding retail stores with over 350 stores and growing strong. And big just shout out to my team, both here at the Franchise Support Center and to my franchise store owners who have been so supportive of this journey. It's kind of fun. We launched the Pride Council. Actually, I think it was in 19 because remember, it was right before.
You're right. Yeah. My apologies. You're right. Yeah.
No.
Last year was a blur.
Yeah, that's true. Time has gone away from all of it. It was very exciting. A number of years before Mark and I became friends, and we had talked about our own personal journey, being open members of the LGBTQ community, but how quietly we had entered that information out into the world of franchising, and how it was just something that we weren't sure what was going to happen. And when it did become clear and we were more comfortable, it came out, we embraced how embraced we were by the community of franchising, and how important it was for us to do something to actually make that journey shorter and more obvious to others. And you can't walk into a room and just, gender, you can tell, it's clear, but with the LGBT community, it's, am I welcome? Am I the only one in the room? And we said we need to make sure that everyone notices how embracing it is, this community, this franchising community is, and how important it is when you are in this community and proud to be in this community, how important it is to share that with your franchisees and prospective franchisees, so they know that it is not part of the process to care about that. Everyone is embraced. When equality is in place for everyone and diversity is celebrated, it's a great thing. So I remember very clearly having a conversation with Mark and our dear friend Suzanne Veal from the IFA about how important this was and what could we do to make a difference. And that was the genesis of the Pride Council. And then we had our first celebratory meeting and launch in DC, and just shocked and amazed at how many people poured in. People from all communities came in and just said how supportive they were and how wonderful it was that we were making this clear. And boom, now here we are. And I'm just so excited to be part of this journey. So, but now enough about me. You guys want to hear from this amazing panel and esteemed guests from Wendy's, who also represent WeQual, the Wendy's Employee Resource Group for the LGBT community. So let's hear more about all of you individually and your role at Wendy's. So we'll start with Beverly. If you just give us a little bit more information of your background and share how you helped shape and manage through the Wendy's path in this space. So.
One real quick thing before, I'm sorry, is just I meant to mention earlier, Paul, we're going to take questions at the end. So if you have any questions whatsoever, just put them in the question box. We're so excited when you hear from these great panelists that are going to be here. So if you have questions, put them in there. Paul and I are going to ask some questions, but we'll give you that opportunity at the end. So I apologize, Beverly, back to you.
No worries. I think Paul wanted me to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Beverly Johnson. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for Wendy's, as everyone has shared, at least in the meeting notice. And I'm excited about this opportunity because just recently, if you haven't read my bio, I came to Wendy's to do some really incredible things. And in being invited to this particular forum is a chance for me to start to share and advocate and look for allies as I continue to drive some of the really interesting but necessary strategies that we're going to be doing inside of this particular corporation.
We couldn't be more thrilled to have you here, and we're so excited to hear more from you later on. So thank you, Beverly. Lynn, if you would take the stage.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. I'm Lynn Smith, and I've been with the Wendy's company for almost 30 years now. I started out my career in our quality assurance department, and now I have actually moved over to our research and development department, and I am a commercialization manager working with our developers there. I'm also one of the original members of WeQual when the WeQual ERG started several years ago. So I've kind of been along for the ride all along.
Great, welcome. Glad to have you here. And last but not least, Stephen.
Hey everybody, I'm Stephen Durwood. I'm the Vice President of Global Design and Construction. I've been with Wendy's for just about 2 years now, and I'm the co-chair for Wendy's Equality Resource Group, also known as WeQual. Really excited to be here.
I love that name, WeQual. I think that is just such a great inclusive name. I love that.
Well, thank you all for being here. We're going to just start out the session with just doing some fireside chats, and Mark and I have a few questions that we have prepared with the help of Suzanne to shoot out to both you guys, but then also Mark, feel free to interrupt and add on a second question if you want to, but we'll just go back and forth. So I get the distinct privilege of asking the first question. And I'm going to go to Beverly. Yeah. So I know that Wendy's has recently really elevated its focus on diversity, equality, inclusion, including bringing you on the team. Can you share a little bit with the audience your approach to dealing with this issue and how the LGBT community is a part of that strategy?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm fairly new to Wendy's compared to Lynn. I can't say 30 years. I may say 3.5 months, so there's a 3 in there somewhere. But one of the things that I made a point to think about as I decided I wanted to join this journey is I came to Wendy's to help promote, but more importantly, accelerate what Wendy's has already been doing. A lot of folks are assuming that there's all this work that's not been done, and I'm just proud to say that Wendy's is one of those companies that's been quietly but diligently driving this journey, and now I'm here to help accelerate and take it to the next step. I think one of the parts of your question was, well, what about the people, what about our leaders, and what are we doing to take this to the next step? We apply our leadership model, and I'll talk a little more about that a little later, to reinforce our goal of culture and inclusive mindset for our people, our franchises, as well as all of the folks that work inside of the organization. And this is about reflecting as we move forward with our journey and the strategy that I'll talk to you about in a second, the ever-changing communities that we all see, our customers, our investors. All of this is incredibly important as Wendy's is on this journey. And then one of the things that I really want to emphasize is we can talk about, and I think, Paul, you said earlier about, we want to be a part of. It's understood you're a part of this. Because one of the things that's most important to me, as well as the leadership team at Wendy's, and they've shared this with me, and I've even heard this from a lot of the people that I've met in the last 97 days, is we are here to include all diverse populations across the spectrum. most importantly, as we look at this particular audience, the LGBTQ or group, Asians, veterans, etc., I'm advocating the entire dimension of diversity. So there isn't anyone that's not going to be coming with us on this particular journey, because this is the way we are going to look. This is the way we are today in our society, and that's incredibly important. As we move forward, a lot of folks are saying, well, what next? Right now, we're in the process of developing a multi-year strategy that's inclusive of those dimensions. So I don't want to have to keep repeating it. Just know it's there, because I think it's important that we are a part of, not always in addition to. So that's why I want to continue to reinforce that. But this particular strategy model that I'm proposing, that we are going to be advocating, is based on three things: data, advocacy, and action. So as we continue to tweak and codify the balance of this strategy since we started this journey in the last 94 days, we will be vetting it with our leaders across Wendy's company. And I'm mentioning across Wendy's company because one of the things that will make this successful is to ensure we have allyship high, wide, and deep inside of the corporation. So I'm going to put a pin in it right there, because there's more to this that I will share later, because I'm sure there are a couple more questions we'll ask me more specifics. But the journey continues, the work is in progress, and the strategy is about to be launched.
Thank you for that, Beverly. What a great story. And we just formed a diversity and inclusion council here at Fast Signs, and so I'm learning also, in addition to being able to give back, and I'm very excited about that. I know you refer to it as the Employee Resources Group. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what that is, and maybe what other brands you're familiar with that might have that, and what is the value?
But what's really interesting is I came to Wendy's, and let me just step back in terms of my history. I used to work for Xerox Corporation, and I was the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for them. And what's interesting about that particular company compared to Wendy's is they had ERGs, but they were called caucuses, and they started back in the 1960s during the race riots in Rochester, New York. And because of the advocacy and what was happening to, at that time, the Black male population, they created caucuses to help drive and create a network of folks that would help advocate and bring in people of diverse backgrounds into the company. Fast forward to 2021, they have caucuses / ERGs across the spectrum globally. So as I came into Wendy's, one of the things that I was particularly excited about was that the ERGs was not a foreign concept. Lynn is nodding her head as I'm saying this. In fact, I believe that WeQual started in 2015. So it's got some roots inside of it in terms of it being around. And as we look at what's physically here now at Wendy's, and I just know there is a growth model and a growth mindset above and beyond where we are today. We have 6 volunteer employee resource groups right now. They're all dedicated to creating opportunities for learning, inclusion, career growth, leadership development. But most importantly, for me right now, they're the ears and eyes, and sometimes my litmus test for some of the things that I want to do. And that's incredibly important. Like I said, we have 6 groups. I heard Stephen say, Mark say he liked the name WeQual. So we have WeQual, our LGBTQ group, Women of Wendy. We have a Black ERG called WeBird. We have Young Professionals. And we also have a cultural diversity as well as a Veterans ERG. And that's not to say we're going to stop there, because as you remember, in the beginning of my opening, I said we want to include all diversity dimensions as we continue on this particular journey. So these groups are incredibly important, and they're a part of Wendy's culture. Interestingly enough, on a side note, I digress, these groups were so important during the pandemic because it was a great way to remain connected for everyone as we work remotely. So that network, that model was one of the things that uplifted a lot of folks and continue to help us through that particular time of this horrible time in this world.
Yeah, that's great insight there, and you're so right. I don't think anybody thinks about, individually you look at, and Paul and I talked about it recently, how COVID affected you and you felt sort of withdrawn, and communities like that need that engagement even more. So it's so great to see how that continued. You mentioned Lynn, and I'm going to cut to Lynn here a little bit. I guess you've been with Wendy's for 30 plus years, but it sounds like you've been involved with We Call from the very beginning. I guess since it was formed at Wendy's. Can you talk to us a little bit about your history there and how that's maybe impacted your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Um, I'll start with going back to that very first meeting of WeQual about 6 or 7 years ago. Um, my colleague Noel and his team were just introducing this new group to the company, basically. And I can remember that when I walked into that room, I was surprised to see so many people in there. I mean, at that time, I was out at work and I knew that there were other gays and lesbians at Wendy's, but I never realized how many there were until I walked into that room. And I remember somebody actually even said, I've never seen so many gays and lesbians in one Wendy's conference room before. Um,
What a great feeling that must have been, right?
and it really was. Because quite honestly, before that time, many of us didn't really feel very comfortable talking about being gay or talking about our personal lives at work. But honestly, after that day, seeing so many of us come together, it was a lot easier to share my personal side with my coworkers at work. And even more importantly, I felt that I could finally bring my whole self to work. And since then, I've actually been able to be my best self at work because I can continue to bring my whole self to work. My entire team knows my wife. They attended my wedding. The support that I get from my WeQual group and from our allies at Wendy's is just amazing, and it's so appreciated.
I love
From
that sentence, bring my whole self to work. I think that says it all, right? I mean, I know even for me, our we have an executive team dinner every year, and my partner comes and we plan around his schedule, and those things are important, right?
Yeah, they really are.
It's hard to
And
be your
in order
best.
to do, somebody's going to say it. Go ahead,
I was
Paul.
gonna say when you can't be authentic, right? I mean, it's hard to be
Yeah,
your best
Right.
self when you can't be your authentic self. And so,
exactly.
yeah. But
Hey, Mark,
I
I think one
I
thing
apologize.
to comment, to build on something Lynn just said. I
Yeah,
think it's important. She said, bring your whole self
I
to
love that.
an organization. I love it, but I also want to just take a moment to tout the support of our leadership, which is incredibly important for every organization to have in order for us to ensure that we have a safe space for all of us, whatever your diversity metric may be. And an example of that is, our entire leadership team, as I said, is supportive, but the majority, if not actually all of our ERGs, have a senior leader sponsor for that
Hmm.
particular ERG. So not only are they there visibly advocating and supporting, but there is a seat at the table for each ERG to provide and participate in the growth and the opportunity for this particular company. An example of that happened a little bit prior to my coming on board. For this particular week call, for example, they played an incredible part in creating a supportive environment, but also they helped us identify opportunities to provide more inclusive benefits. As some of you may know, these suggestions helped Wendy's achieve a score of 100% on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. And we're proud
Wow.
to say that we will be doing that again this year. We've done the preliminary test, but if for folks out there that may not know what that is, it's a premier benchmarking survey in the U.S. to measure workplace environments and promote LGBTQ equality. And so I'm personally proud that this is a company that I represent that has demonstrated it. But I'm also more excited about the fact that we help guide and drive and we will help coach and provide that input. And that's why I said it's a two-way street, and they're part of the plan, not in addition to the plan.
Yeah, I mean it's a great message, and I know we've all been at places. I assume I've been in a number of companies where I didn't feel comfortable talking about my partner and my other half. And when I came here, our CEO, who's also the chairwoman of the International Franchise Association, has always embraced me and my partner, and it does. I love that's why when you said that, it really struck a chord with me, Lynn. Bring your whole self to work, because that's all about. So thank you for that. Paul, anything you want to follow up on?
Well, I have I do have a couple follow-up questions. One I have, but I want to get to Stephen because I do want to. He's been so patient. He's sitting there. But you've been
Fair
with
enough.
Wendy's about 2 years now, right? Yep.
Yep, that's correct.
Did you consider Wendy's approach to the LGBTQ community when you joined? And has anything changed over the last couple of years? I mean, we have had a lot of community expression of this issue, and pride has become a bigger thing. I'm curious to hear about your journey, both pre-Wendy's and now post-Wendy's.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question, and I do have a unique personal story here, because until moving to Columbus 2 years ago, I'd spent the entirety of my professional career in New York City. And in living in New York City, I honestly never, ever had to give much thought to being gay. It's really easy to be gay in New York City, and we're everywhere there. So whether it's a workplace, whether it's out socially, it was very easy. So when I got the call from Wendy's asking if I talked to them about this new position, of course, the first thing you do is you go to Google and you talk to friends. And my friends were like, oh my gosh, are you sure? It's the Midwest. I heard that Wendy's is super conservative. They're anti-gay. And it went on. And it just created tons of anxiety. But the fact is that I couldn't find anything that confirmed that kind of negative claim. But by the same token, I didn't find anything that supported a positive LGBTQ plus position either. So I entered into the conversations with them as with a commitment basically to bring the real me to the table and to talk about my work, my life, and my partner. And honestly, I was just so impressed with the conversation. And my takeaway from that was really that Wendy's was at the start of a journey to take a really hard look in the mirror and ultimately to work toward creating the best version of itself. And what I heard was a message around wanting to be a more modern, more global, more open, more diverse company that would ultimately become a draw for the best talent out there. And I loved the vision, and I really wanted to be a part of it. And we started in a place where there was a lot of opportunity. But to your second question, in the 2 short years I've been here, there's really been progress. And I feel that we're well on our way to becoming what I would consider a company that leads by example. In those 2 short years, we've added partner benefits within 6 months after I joined. Leslie or Beverly mentioned we obtained a perfect score on the HRC Corporate Equality Index 2 years in a row. And, quite honestly, in the year prior to my joining, we weren't even, in the running for that. So that's a significant testament to the work and effort that the team put in. We changed WeQual from an employee network to an ERG with its own budget. And as an ERG, we're creating real value-added programming for our members, including recently bringing an out U.S. member of Congress to the WeQual constituency to share his story with us. And for the first time ever, we raised the rainbow flag at our headquarters for the month of June with a celebratory flag raising event. It was attended by about 75 people, including our senior leadership team. So I think the representation there and the message that we're sending, I think the company is that it's great to bring your whole self to work. And honestly, that's what we're asking everyone to do. And I can honestly say that every single day I see real life examples of what it means to live your values at Wendy's.
I mean, what a great story. And I guess to follow up a little bit, I love the story of the raise the flag ceremony. I think that that kind of says it all. But I guess, Lynn, with your involvement in WeQual, what did Wendy's do? And that's probably one example to celebrate Pride Month. I mean, I think we all sort of look at that and say, gee, how can we do this? I understand that you guys have done some things. So share with everybody sort of, what did you all do to celebrate? I'm guessing Stephen just gave us a little insight there, which is so amazing. But
So, as you probably know, the Wendy's Restaurant Support Center headquarters is in Dublin, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus. And one of the first things that the WeQual group did was started to get involved with having a float and marchers in the Columbus Pride Parade.
Awesome.
Float's usually directed rated by the WeQual team, and it supports anyone who wants to march from Wendy's as part of the Wendy's Equality Resource Group. Of course, this year the parade was virtual, but WeQual still participated. We actually submitted a video featuring pictures of our WeQual members and their families, along with the message of WeQual's commitment to supporting and advocating for the LGBTQ community within our Wendy's family. As Stephen mentioned, we also raised the flag for the very first time over the Wendy's headquarters, which, you know, when I started with the company almost 30 years ago, I would never have imagined that happening.
Right.
And here we are, fast forward 29 years later, and I'm actually the one raising the flag,
Wow.
which was probably one of the proudest moments I've had.
I mean, it gets me a little emotional just thinking about that moment for you. That's incredible. What an opportunity.
Yeah, so thank you again for that honor, Stephen. Aside from Pride, though, we also have another big event that we do in the fall, and we actually partner with the LGBTQ equality group at Coca-Cola to celebrate Spirit Day. Spirit Day, of course, is a day that we bring our WeQual family and allies together to stand up to bullying and to commit to equality and to celebrate the freedom to be who and what we are. And that's coming up again in October for us. And then, of course, Stephen also mentioned we have some other events where we sponsor some leadership discussions, some panels similar to this. The congressman that was able to join us, we put out a quarterly newsletter to help keep our group up to date on what's going on with both WeQual community and the LGBTQ community at large. And we sponsor a periodic happy hour or coffee hour, which, as Beverly mentioned earlier, that really was one of the key things to keep the WeQual group together and just make sure we checked in on everybody last year during COVID. So we did a lot of these virtually. And we're hoping this year that by the end of the year, we'll be able to get back together in person again for either a coffee hour or a happy hour.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing the story. And the story of raising the flag is and after, you know, when you went to work, they're not imagining it, and to do it 30 something years later, it just, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was. There are some of my friends that were part of the start of WeQual as well, who have now moved on from the company. But that day when I got home, I had to text everybody and tell them. So there's a lot of ex-Wendy's family that were overjoyed in hearing that story.
Yeah, I bet.
Congratulations. Hey, Mark, I have a follow-up question that I'd love to ask both, first Beverly question and then Stephen. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Perfect. And I'm just so curious, Beverly, you know, in a franchisor franchisee relationship within franchising, you know, we can't. I mean, how did you include franchise store owners, your franchisees, in this whole journey? You know, it's a tough one because we can influence culture, but we can't control culture on the franchise store level. And so how did you maneuver through that, and how do you ensure that you're influencing that culture and yet not controlling it, and getting inclusion and getting buy-in and, you know, collaboration with your franchise store owners?
Yeah, I think you said the most important words. We have to model, we have to do some of the things to ensure people can see it. As most of your audience is probably well aware, franchisees are solely responsible for developing and utilizing their own guidelines, making their own hiring, firing, disciplinary decisions, and even managing their day-to-day process and procedures. So what Wendy's brand has done, especially as we push and realize this DE&I journey that's continuing beyond where we already are and some of the great things we've done, we're ensuring that our franchisees know some of the important elements inside of this work. And the resources that we provide on a daily basis also help advocate for that. So we advocate, we demonstrate what this brand stands for. We practice inclusivity, we drive culture, we advance our culture, our company's journey as an employer of choice for the LGBTQ community in partnership. We always advocate for what we're doing with this particular ERG so people can see the stimulation and the activities that are happening at the restaurant, at the top of the restaurant level. But most importantly, I have to keep emphasizing, we model the behavior and share where we can with all franchisees, the things that we could particularly be doing. Because if we look at this with almost 6,500 restaurants currently in operation in the U.S., it's important to recognize that we have to emphasize, uplift, and prepare the right culture that's going to be important to our new market expansion. And that includes the dimensions of all of the folks that we are going to need as employees, as consumers, as shareholders, all across that particular board. So we have to do those things because that's the market. The market is driving us there, but it's also the right thing to do. This reinforcement of our values, and again, I'm really proud of this, will obviously be continuing to be dominant in everything that we're doing worldwide. But more importantly, it's impacting our franchise strategy, and it will be seen more and more as we feel closes over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations. I think you hit it right on the head. That modeling, you know, at Wildbridge Unlimited, in our values, you know, we embrace diversity. That's just clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's talked about with every single candidate. That, along with our other values, of course, but just to ensure that we've got buy-in, because that's so important. Because those are the people on the street, the most, you know, some of the most important parts, strategic partners you have is a franchise brand. The people who are out there doing it, and you know, for those of us who are B2C, business to consumer, we want all consumers to be welcome, right? I mean, that's just it. It's not just a good, solid, thoughtful value. It's also it makes sense, right? You want everyone to eat Wendy's, right? And we want everyone to feed the birds, so everyone's welcome.
We got a question from the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I do want to follow up one question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry. Because this next question, I'm gonna start with you to answer it first, because I want to hear your perspective. But you, from the audience. But you go ahead. Ask your question.
Well, I'm gonna ask Stephen a question because you hear a lot, even within the LGBT community, about what I hear called rainbow capitalism. You know, is the putting the LGBTQ logo and the rainbow on the logo. You know, what's your perspective on that? Is that capitalizing on a popular thought process and culture thing? And, you know, what are the most effective ways that you think companies, not just Wendy's, but can combat that naysayer attitude, but also do things that are really clear about who you are without seeming capitalistic and taking advantage of this wave that we're experiencing?
Sure, that's a great question. And to your point, I mean, I think I read an article just today in the paper about that exact topic. But ultimately, I honestly believe that any outward-facing show of support is a good thing, and that more representation is better than less. In my mind, representation is the thing that really helps to create awareness and ultimately promote acceptance. You know, that's on the outward facing. So when I see Nike with a rainbow flag, et cetera, like that makes me feel great that a huge company is supporting LGBTQ plus members of society. I think where it gets tougher is when you're an employee working for those companies. And the honest answer is that you've got to live the values. Every single employee can tell the difference between a company that does what it says and a company that's just offering talk. And the company that's just offering talk is never going to have authenticity. You're never going to build the kind of culture that you're telling the world by supporting all of these initiatives that you're actually about. Your employees are never going to buy in because you're not living that on a day-to-day basis. I think the success of what we're doing at Wendy's is rooted 100% in the fact that we're doing the right thing for people every single day. And the company is so highly invested in ensuring that there's not just someone up on high deciding what's best for the employee base, but the company is constantly asking, what would make this a better place to work? What would make our healthcare plans better? What would make this a more inclusive environment? What would make you want to stay here? And then they do something really simple. They do it. That's what it means to live your values. And I think, when you talk about rainbow washing, the companies that are really, leaning in to simply capitalize on it are the ones that are going to never have that fullness of culture that those companies who actually do what they say they're going to have.
I love that, and I've said it a million times in the last 18 months, is that especially in these crazy days that have been living through, is that karma's working faster due to the pandemic. So if you just say it and don't do it, you're going to get caught, and it's going to be clear to everyone, and that will have way worse ramifications than not doing it at all. So
that's right.
We have a couple of questions that I'm going to move to. I'm going to ask this first question to Lynn, but then Paul, I want your perspective, so I'll let you think about it, just because I know you enough that you'll have a great answer on this. But first question from the audience is, what do you wish your younger self would know about being your full self in the business world? I love that question. And what advice would you give to younger generations? So Lynn, I'll let you start that, and anybody else can weigh in, obviously. But
That's one of those things that when you're sitting around the bonfire with your friends and you talk about if you could go back and talk to your former self, what would you tell them? I think if I could do that in regards to my career at Wendy's, it would be have confidence in not only yourself but your coworkers to accept you for who you are. Don't be so afraid, but actually take that step, take that reach out, and just talk and have confidence that you will be accepted. Um, and that's one of the things that I think I would tell young people today who are just starting out their career is as you start your career, just be who and what you are. Bring your whole self to that commitment that you're making with that company that you're signing on with. Because it's the only way that you're truly going to be able to fulfill your career and have a full career in life. So have that confidence.
Yeah, and I would say for me, when I came here was the first time I felt I could be open in my role as a member of the executive team and being gay. And boy, I'll tell you, it's like the weight of the world is lifted, right? It's like you go into it with this pressure and how's it going to react? But if you're with the right company and you do the research and everything like Stephen talked about and stuff, it really is like the weight of the world. You feel so good. So, Paul, what are your thoughts on that question?
It's not dissimilar to what Lynn said. It's just, I have, I don't ever like to talk too much about wasting time, but I wasted a lot of time anticipating negativity and preparing myself for negativity, which stopped me from being positive. And, it's those conversations you go into, what are they going to say? And then you go through the dialogue and the conversation in your head with 20 different versions. And usually 20 different, all 20 of them are not what happens, right? I mean, so it's all just that processing and not being who you are is really, it does hold you back. It's back to, be your whole self, be authentic, and let the cards lie where they fall. It's at a certain point, and some of this does come with age, so it's hard. I'm in my 50s, I'm older. So, in your 20s, it's harder to have that confidence to just really truly believe that you don't care. I mean, what you should care about is that you're respected for your work at work, and you work hard and you do everything in your power to make it happen. If there's other stuff that get in the way, that's not your problem. That is someone else's problem. When I came out at work a long time ago, and I have, and Mark and I will fight about who has the best boss, but we can do that later. Jim and Nancy Carpenter, Jim is the founder, and what Jim said was, without seeming rude, I don't care who you love. I'm just happy that you love. But I mean, honestly, it's none of my business, and I'm happy if you're happy. But this is not a big deal. And don't ever, and I mean, I asked the question, I'm like, what if somebody, and I'm in development, what if a candidate asks me a question and I don't like about my wife, or, what should I do? And he's like, you should never your lead story, right? But you never get to lie. We don't lie here. We don't lie at Wild Birds Unlimited. So you answer the question honestly, and don't try to avoid it, because that will be a disaster. And I said, well, what if they don't want to join our system? And he said, then I don't think I want them. We serve the public. If they care That's their problem, but that's not something that I'm interested in letting someone represent the brand that I've created. People who don't want to invite everyone to fulfill our mission of bringing people and nature together. It's not we bring people and any group together. We bring all people and all nature together.
I love that story. Every time you tell it, Paul, I love that story. That's really a good dovetail to the next question. I'm going to direct it with you to start, Beverly. And this is a question from the audience. Says, I have a public platform in the franchise space. This is the question. I've been told that franchising is conservative, and there was feedback that I need to talk less frequently about my son and his boyfriend. We chat about our families and children publicly, as it could turn people away or come off as advocacy. What are your thoughts about hiding this, and embracing all people? So we've all been there, right? I mean, I've had conversations with franchisees in my role that I know probably wouldn't embrace my partner and I have a funny story I can tell us all over drinks about that Catherine and I laugh about every day. But we've all been there, right? Where you to Paul's point, like, do I talk about my boyfriend when they ask about my wife? I'd love your thoughts on what the recommendation for this person.
So, well, I'm going to also throw it back to you because I'd love to hear your story around that, because I think personal stories can add invite some ideas for people. But you also have to look at this and you have to say, there's not going to be one answer that's going to fix some of the issues and some of the misconceptions and confusion and sometimes downright ignorant comments that people are going to make to us. So please put that as the understanding under this umbrella. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the organization and the place that we work. And we have to recognize that we're going to find some knuckleheads out there that are not where we want to be in terms of this journey. I have found myself specifically here at Wendy's recognizing that I am lucky and blessed at where I am. And every time I have an opportunity, and this is where you may have an opportunity as well, I try to remove the emotion from the conversation, and I try to then create a space where I can educate and advocate and bring that person along to one of the things that I think is important to why we need to do this. And then I engage in dialogue, because we are not going to completely change anyone overnight. But you're going to have to take that opportunity in this particular instance, recognize that you have to be unapologetically who you are. I personally will never, ever advocate that we steer away from that in any circumstances, whether you're a woman, a person of color, whether you're gay, whatever the case may be. Understand that. But do understand that there are going to be some folks that are just not with us on this journey yet. But recognize that this is incumbent upon all of us to take people on that journey, educate, advocate, and look for allies around that, and then take yourself from there. Let me just emphasize, that's why it's so important that we find and we're in organizations where you can influence, again, high, wide, and deep, ensuring your company is focused on commitment to an inclusive environment, whether there's a leadership model that can help drive that mindset. I was in an organization once, and there was this grassroots organization, and it wasn't even an ERG, where literally they were doing touch point bias trainings with leaders in different departments so that they can start to impact that change that way. So I'm not sure what else you are dealing with, but in that particular instance, you have to step back, be who you are, recognize you may not change that person 100%, but you do have to educate and say, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I see. And then, oh, by the way, let's just kind of move forward from here.
And I think it's a great message, because I know for me, when I've been in those situations, and of course, as Paul said, I'm old like he is, I guess, but although I think I'm older, maybe, I don't know, but depressing as that is. But, I can think back about when I was reluctant and I raised the issue and said, well, no, I actually have a partner. You're surprised, I think, for the most part, of the reaction you get. And I'd say mostly today it's positive. I don't know that that's the case 10 years ago, and there's a lot of variables on it. But I've always felt when I've raised that, then people start to ask questions. Oh, tell me about your partner, and where is he, and what does he do? And that's something that's amazing. Lynn or Stephen, your thoughts on that? If somebody's telling you shouldn't talk about it, and what are your thoughts on that question? This is something we've all dealt with, I think.
I've actually been in that situation, and my response is usually, I'm very sorry that you feel that way. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I'm certainly not, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, and I'm not going to shove anything in your face, but I'm also not going to hide who I am. There may be some things that, where we can find common ground. But in the meantime, let's just avoid that subject then.
Yeah. Good. Stephen, thoughts?
Yeah, just from my perspective, I think time and place play a huge role in this. Like, as I mentioned, living in New York City for my entire career, like, that's not something that I ever had to think about. And interestingly, moving to Columbus, it did pop into my mind. It's a totally different place with a totally different set of expectations. Of course, I'm new here, so I'm learning everything. But quite honestly, if you're at a company and somebody at your company tells you that, you're clearly at the wrong company. And I think as important as it is for a company to live their values, I think that it's incumbent upon each of us to try as best as we can to work at a place that also represents the values that we hold. So, from my perspective, I think I would have a hard time having lived, so out and open, not pushing back if that came up to me, regardless of who it was, a client, whether it was an employer, etc. Not sure what the outcome would be, but I think for me it would be important to.
Yeah, and I think if you're living your true self, to use Lynn's words earlier, you might not care about the outcome to a degree, right? This is who I am, and I'm going to share who I am, and I don't want to rub it in your face. I love that term, Lynn, either, but it is who I am, and I'm not going to change that. So this is a great comment. I don't know how many of you know Evan Hackle, so I'm just going to read it. It's just a great comment in this topic, and it just says, and Evan's a good friend. Him and I worked together in St. Louis. Pride goes beyond the LGBT community. When you support the LGBTQ community, you make everyone comfortable because a message of acceptance is clear and a place that people want to work in. I think that's just that's great. And we're going to have to wrap up here quickly. So I have two quick questions that have come in. One of those is, and I guess Beverly, I'll go to you. His question is, what does we qual mean? Wendy's quality. That's the question from the audience.
Yes, I think you just answered it. Wendy's equality. Yeah, you just answered that.
Okay. And then the last question, and we can kind of go around it, and who wants to answer it. But what are your recommendations for starting a Pride initiative? I'm gonna roll to my great partner Paul on that first, since we did start the one in franchising, and I think we both recognized as we became friends, and it's a little bit what Lynn said earlier. You'd walk into a conference and go, I know there's other gay people here, but I don't know who they are, and I don't know where they are, and I want to know. I want to know, and but I think that's it. So recommendations to start a Pride initiative. Paul, I'm going to roll that to you to start, and then we'll maybe go around.
Yeah, I'll pick up a little bit off of what Beverly said. Is just modeling and communicating, letting people know, that it is an inclusive environment, and making sure that, just the existence of the Pride Council through the International Franchise Association, and saying it, having that first event, that this is a thing. And when it is a thing, people feel like, oh, there are other people like this, and now we can do something. And then I think just continuing to educate, advocate, do things like this to make it clear that franchising loves everyone. Maybe not, and everyone is welcome, right? So there's other things, obviously, as you go deeper, advocacy and really, I love our value of we embrace diversity, and trying to convince other franchise systems to communicate that in their mission, vision, and values, but then to communicate it out to the public that this is an important thing for us. And so this is what we want others to embrace, is very important. There's a million other things, but I'll pass it on.
All right, Beverly?
Lynn,
Beverly or Lynn? Yeah, Lynn. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
I would follow along the same lines with Paul. I'd say the most important thing when you're starting off is make sure that your community that you're working with starting this off knows that it's an inclusive and a safe place. That's very important. That's where you're going to get that comfort level for people to actually start talking about it. But the other thing I would definitely say, and this is something that I've learned and am working on now that I'm actually on the leadership team for WeQual, is definitely cultivate and embrace your allies.
Yes.
That's one of the things we've talked about with the leadership team this year is how do we bring in more allies? How do we get more ally support? And it's very pleasantly surprising to find just how much allyship is out there. I refer back to my comment earlier about having the confidence to talk to people about it. You start to find out you have allies you had no idea you had. So definitely cultivate those.
Yeah. Well said.
I just want to just tag on to something that Lynn said that I think is particularly important if I can, and that's around the representation component. I think one of the reasons I got involved with WeQual was because I really wanted to role model the fact that you can be a senior leader within an organization like Wendy's and be out and open. And I didn't see that broadly across the organization. And it's also why, as a part of our programming, we're bringing in out franchisees to talk to the group. We're bringing in other out senior leaders that people may or may not have known were gay to simply say, like, the company is telling you it's okay. We're also showing you that you can be successful in this environment and living an out and open life. So just role modeling so that younger members of the team actually see that they can be out, open, and successful in the organization.
Yeah, so just to build on everything everyone else has said, I'm going to kind of take it back and be a little bit more structured. So if you're looking at trying to do something, perhaps the first thing is Stephen Covey said, first need to understand and be understood. So we need to understand exactly what others are doing that may be working, that may not be working in other places. So this particular form is just a tipping point. We are not pretending that we know all of the answers in terms of the right structure and fit to ensuring that the whole franchise community starts to move in that direction and we're all inclusive. But it would be important to do a little bit of research and some additional benchmarking outside of this particular call, because there are some really interesting companies that are doing things that are taking it in a different direction. Also, you want to look at when and if you get this thing moving, you want to look at making sure whatever program that is proposed, that it's tied to people, process, and the business results. Because again, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there is something in it for every party that's a part of. And then the most important piece is you've got to make sure that you've got advocates and allies high, wide, and deep, as I said earlier. You've got to make sure that there are stakeholders that are saying this is something that will benefit everyone, not only the constituents that are proposing it, but the organization that it's going to be impacting at a large. And then hopefully as we move forward, there's some metrics that can definitely prove to sustain it so that there's some stickiness and longevity inside of what you're trying to do.
Great. And I think our last question is, we're going to wrap up here quickly, and it's along the same lines, is what advice would you give franchisor in the early stages of formalizing a diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like within the brand? And I'll start a little bit. We just formed one here, and we selected franchisees that were very diverse. We actually reached out to Ursula, who is the chair of the diversity council of the IFA, and got some great, to your point, there's plenty of resources out there. So we wanted to come up with a mission statement. So we took half a dozen mission statements and we crafted it to something. We actually just finalized ours. And now we're talking about how do we take that message and put it on our website and use it to recruit employees and make it available to our franchisees. And I think we're just going to keep building blocks until it really becomes a message. And there's this amazing video one of our franchisees did that a Chamber of Commerce did on diversity and inclusion that was just phenomenal. And we're going to take that and use that as a baseline to launch this at our conference. So for us, that's what we did, is we relied on a lot of what other people have done. And we picked a group of very diverse franchisees from all walks of life, gay, straight, black, white, whatever, Asian, and we're building something I think will be great. But who else here? I mean, you obviously have other thoughts on starting that within a brand. I guess, Beverly, I'll go to you again.
Yeah, I think I just want to kind of underscore what I just said earlier, and you said the same thing, Mark. Again, benchmarking, researching, making sure that you're modeling some of the successes that you already see. But as I want to again emphasize the stakeholders and the advocates, you want to make sure that there's somebody across the spectrum that there is support. Because again, it's going to take a lot of folks to be there to provide the advice, the counsel, the direction, and some of the things that you're going to do. Don't try to do it alone. And when I say allies, I mean even outside of this particular network. You'd be surprised at how many folks have already done some of this under different umbrellas of diversity that have been successful that I think might benefit your particular question, whoever just asked that question.
As we get to wrap up, Paul, I'll give you a few minutes to answer that and give any wrap-up thoughts before we close.
Well, I mean, I don't have anything additional to add. You guys have just nailed it, but just using your resources, right? And I think that is, it kind of goes back to that other question that you started out with, that you asked Lynn and myself, was about, what that advice that you would give. And I will tell you that when you are not your authentic self, you tend to just hang back. And what you do is then you miss your opportunity to use your resources and to connect to resources. And so I'm going to twist it back to your first original question of saying, like, you guys have already given the great advice on setting up a structure for this kind of programming within a company. But it speaks to that first question is that when you are comfortable being yourself, you're more comfortable asking others, and you make yourself vulnerable and educated and a part of the group and collaborative. So those are important things to remember, that being of your whole self, which Lynn, I wrote that down. It's so cool, and it just allows you to make yourself better, to make your key stakeholders better, and to make your company better. And that's what this is all about, is really just improving the world, right?
Well, a perfect way to end, Paul. Thank you. So first off, I want to thank a little bit behind the scenes, Kate, who's kind of monitoring things, and Suzanne Beal, who's just absolutely amazing. But really, thank you to Beverly and Lynn and Stephen. Paul and I are so excited to have you a part of this, and we hope you'll stay involved with the Pride Council after this, because we really want to bring this message out. And this has just been amazing. And I want to thank everybody who's paid attention. We've got some nice attendees here. I understand this will be recorded and be sent out. So thank you to everybody who participated. If you have any interest in joining the Pride Council and be a part of it, you can obviously reach out to Paul or myself, or you can email Susan Beal at sbeal, B-E-A-L-L, @franchise.org. And I think that's it for today. So happy Pride, everybody.
One more shout out to you, but shout out to the International Franchise Association.
Absolutely.
The foundation, and all of the help that they're doing, all of the everything that they're doing to make this clear that we're here and we're accepting, and thank you to them, because the leadership has done an amazing job.
Happy Pride, everybody. Thank you.
Happy Pride, everyone. Thank you, everyone.